Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to the September edition of Molten Music Monthly. Well, the kids have gone back to school, which means that time and space and dedication to our synthesizer lives is opening up in front of us. We've got more space to do things, more time to get involved in that flow of electrons, that control, that voltage, that MIDI, that plug-in, perhaps. And it's also starting just to get that little bit chilly. But I have a whole load of stuff to tell you about today, and I've also got them next door that seem to be sawing something down, strimming something, digging something up, and generally making a whole load of noise. So that's exciting. But hopefully that won't dampen our enthusiasm for what is undoubtedly a bumper edition. So let me rattle through it. Alright, let's go. Cherry Audio Harmonia gets interpolated. Robaux DCSN3 makes decisions. Herbs and Stones has legs. Woovebox gets lost behind the sofa. Guitar Rig 7 goes all loopy. Analogue Solutions is both restrained and bonkers. Pet Rock is Luna driven by lunatics. We have a trio of mixers. Bastl Instruments finds some melody. DF Audio has the cutest patch bay ever. Manifold Research Center generates CV. AMSynths has a System 100 coming along. DAWproject says we can share everything. Dreadbox reissues a very different Hypnosis. Plum Audio packs all the modes into a filter. Larix Electro generates sequences and triggers. 4MS puts the meta into Metamodular. SOMA Labs reinvents the theremin. And Modal is restructuring. But first, we've had some very disturbing news from Moog. Moog Music has their base, their HQ, their main factory out in Asheville, North Carolina. And it was recently purchased, the whole lot, the whole Moog idea has been purchased by In Music, who also do products like Akai, AM Audio, and other bits of very synth relevant things. And when that happened, most of us were thinking, well, that's strange in some ways, that's slightly disappointing, that's worrying. I mean, does that mean that Moog has no money and they're essentially running on empty because someone's had to step in and grab hold of them? And also In Music are kind of renowned, rightly or wrongly, for taking a brand that's failing, pulling it apart, and making like a very cheap entry-level version of what it was previously famous for. I don't know that that's entirely accurate, but that's the vibe, that's the sense that we get. And so the fact that a company like this is buying one of the most beloved brands of all time, of ever, it affects people. It's quite an emotional connection, I think, that we hold with Moog, whether that's historical, whether that's nostalgic, whether that's new and groovy, who knows, but we all have bits of Moog knocking around. I mean, well, I say we all do, most of us will do, or we aspire to do so, because there's something beautiful, there's something amazing about that name and about the stuff that they do. I mean, you can argue that it's all made in the same place, it's all just ships out of China, blah blah blah, and that's fine, but there's still something within the heart of what we perceive to be Moog music that makes a difference. It might be something to do with the musicians who promote it, the people who endorse it, the elegance of the instruments you see about the place, and the fact that it's just become so much part of the story of electronic music. Anyway, I'm digressing. What is the news that I'm talking about? Well, the news is that it seems that In Music has fired almost everyone at the Asheville facility, which is not great. It's not great at all, ever. We don't want that. What we had hoped is that In Music we'd be able to provide some stability and some distribution and some money in order for Moog to get back on their feet and do what they do best. And unfortunately, all of our sort of worst fears have been realised in that, no, they've not done that. They've just fired everybody and will be, we imagine, shutting down the classic Asheville factory. Now, I should stress that none of this is official. There's been no comment from Moog Music or from In Music for that matter. This just comes from people on the ground reporting on what has happened to them, as far as we know. The best information we have is that 30 people have been laid off, I think, which is mostly from the production staff. So, well, we can speculate on what that means. I guess, speculating myself, I would say what that's probably about is that all of the littler stuff, all of the smaller stuff, so the Mother 32, the DFAM, the Work Stacked, and the other little one, what's it called, the Mavis, those sorts of bits and pieces, the sort of synthesizers at the bottom end of things, more of the mass production stuff, I imagine is just being shipped straight to somewhere else in the world where it's going to be made very much cheaper and in probably greater numbers. Now, there's on one hand that's like, hooray, more synths for cheaper for everybody, but there has to be an element where we believe in the idea that Moog stood for some kind of level of quality control, some kind of level of something. And the fear is that if it just all gets made in other big factories and other places, with no reference to what people like about that legacy, then it's essentially going to become a Behringer type situation, where you're having a properly branded clone of itself made with cheaper parts, with cheaper labour, to provide us with cheaper synthesizers. Now, cheaper synthesizers, we like that, but what is the cost, ultimately? I don't know. It just seems sad. Whether the reality simply is that to make synthesizers that make enough money in the sort of market that we're in, they just have to be cheaper and they have to be made en masse overseas. If that is the reality, then I guess so be it. It's very, very sad for the people who lost their jobs, for that factory, for the idea and the perception behind Moog, because really, Moog is about perception. It's about the idea of it, and if you take that away, it just becomes kind of another synth. Because there's elements within what Moog do that are just bog standard subtractive little monosynths that a lot of people do. But it's that sense of having a Moog, of owning something of that history, of respecting and buying into this concept that the people who work at Moog also own a part of Moog, which is not entirely true, or is it? But again, it's our perception. We give them a lot of love and respect that's built purely on what we think it is about. And all this reality coming in is not going to do the brand any good whatsoever, I don't think. Now, it may well be that all the big stuff, all the juicy stuff, the Matriarchs or the Moog 1s or Sub 37s or other stuff that comes along will continue to be made or assembled or quality controlled or whatever it is that actually happens at the Asheville facility. Maybe. We shall see. We shall see. But it's certainly a sad day, and our thoughts go out to the people who have lost their jobs, which is a real shame. And I guess on another note, it will be really interesting to see whether Moog actually end up releasing synthesizers that compete directly with Behringer. How do we feel about that? I don't know. I guess they're just trying to find some interesting upbeat thing within all the nastiness. All these things remain to be seen. Cherry Audio has a new synthesizer in town. Its dust has hardly settled on the last one that they put out. This one's called Harmonia. This is a bit more of an original idea rather than being an emulation of something else. This is a synthesizer of their own. And the idea is that you take a whole bunch of harmonics and throw them together. I think it's a bit more of an additive situation. You have two oscillators with sine waves, and you raise the level of various sine waves at various harmonic pitches in order to create a wash, a bed, a cinematic soundscape of tones and interesting drones. It's that kind of thing. The interesting, quirky thing about Harmonia is that rather than just using sine waves, although it can use sine waves, it has a whole bunch of sampled waveforms. So rather than perhaps the purity of the sort of the organic organ sound that you can get often from additive synthesis, or that glassiness, this is going to bring in lots of different textures, lots of different tones, lots of different movement. And then of course you can smash all that about. You can bend it, break it, filter it, all that kind of thing, move it so that it's an endlessly evolving source of sound. Cherry Audio do great stuff for 30 quid usually, and it gives you an extra palette, an extra range of sounds in order to add to what you're already doing. And this one, like the signs, like the Dream Synth, like a few others of theirs, are a little bit more unique than your regular emulation of stuff, and that's always a good thing. The Robaux DCSN3, an interesting name. I like Robaux, I like them a lot. They do really interesting modules. They're not prolific, particularly, slow. There's one. A couple of years later, there's another one. Both of them are interesting, look great. I love the design of what they do. I love kind of the intention behind what they do. And so when they have a new module out, that's something that I'm definitely going to be interested in. This one is sort of a decision tree. You give it something and then it decides where it wants to put it. Interesting. So you give it like a trigger and it decides to put that trigger into one of other 3 places, and then one of other 3 places of wherever it is it went. So it randomly assigns it to a destination, which then splits it into another possibility of another 3. And on the one hand, it's like, well, that's a really interesting way of dealing with randomization, because you're randomizing the output as well as the actual value, perhaps, of what it's doing. But then conversely, you end up with a whole load of outputs. So you're going to need to have lots of different sound sources, lots of different things being triggered, because you've got one thing going in and a whole possibility of spread stuff coming out, which is, it's just an interesting way of thinking about randomness and destination and patterns within what you're triggering. It has a sort of a Turing machine vibe in it, in that you've got a knob that you can turn that will take it from chaos into continuous looping. So you can potentially find something that you like, find a mode or a pattern or randomization or a continuation that you like, and then you can just dial that in and grab it so it loops and plays again consistently, and then perhaps you can start edging in some chaos back in. It's interesting. You're going to need a lot of modules to go with it though, I think. So interesting. I haven't quite fully grasped it, I don't think, but I like the concept, I like the idea, and I like the look. Now, Herbs and Stones are fabulous, fabulously hip and stir, I think. Just awesome stuff they do. They seem to be a bunch of hippies in a field having a fabulous time with electronics, which is, that resonates with me all the time. And this is part of their new foray into Eurorack. They've been dabbling in Eurorack, having done mostly desktop boxes or laptop boxes you sit cross-legged with and play around with, have now become something that they've ported into Eurorack, which is quite interesting. The latest one is called Legs. Great name. And it's a bit of a percussion module, kick drum percussion module. In fact, it could be, potentially, it's a little bit like the Maximus Iteratus Ultra, which has recently been discontinued from Noise Engineering. Maybe this is the way back into that kind of idea of having something which can be a kick but can also be lots of other percussion at the same time. But Legs is a bit more analog. It starts off with a voltage controlled triangle core oscillator, which then you can bend it through different stages of saturation. You've got 2 independent trigger inputs, so you can be doing things like a series of things and then an accent, or 2 different competing patterns, or mixing all sorts of that stuff together. It's very voltage controllable, it's very modulatable, and can produce a whole bunch of interesting percussion sounds. I'm not hanging about this month. Oh no, I'm going to rattle my way through these. So next up is the Woovebox. It's kind of a Jonathan Ross's Groovebox, I suppose. Now, to be honest, I think this is just the long line in a chain which has created a break in consciousness. And it's not their fault. They just happened to turn up at the wrong time, I think. Because ultimately, I'm not going to go into what it's all about, because I'm not sure that I care at this moment, and let me explain sort of why. We've had this run of these little boxes. Everything from a pocket operator, I suppose, through to that thing with the buttons, the M8 or something on the front, and then there's another teensy thing with a couple of knobs on, and then there's something else and something else and something else, and all these little groove boxes, synthesizers, samplers come along, and they are packed with more and more and more stuff. You start off with, it just makes 8-bit noises, then it's 8-bit and sampling, then it's 8-bit virtual analog and something, then it's granular, virtual analog, resonators. And all of this is fantastic, that you can build into such a small device, such awesome power of synthesis. But the problem remains that you're in a tiny device. And the problem with that is obvious. You can't get to any of it. You've got perhaps a couple of buttons and a knob. I mean, I guess if you're trapped, like underground, on a train maybe, you're trapped on a train for 8 hours, it's going to be more interesting than playing Candy Crush on your phone. Maybe. I suppose. Because you've got the time there to sit and concentrate and to just tease out a pattern or a rhythm or a line of something. You know, you can try really hard and dial in those individual numbers and those individual bits and start building a track. It's very, very possible. But for me, I've just got really fed up of these tiny little boxes with bugger all user interface that are expecting you to write entire tunes on. It's like, what's the point? What am I trying to do with this thing? Surely there has to be a point where user interface has to rule. It has to be an important aspect. And if you're making something, a tiddly, tiny little thing, which is fun and nice and stuff, and then charging hundreds of dollars for it, you know, it needs a user interface which makes some kind of sense. And these things really don't. And I've been far too nice about them for far too long. I mean, you know, it's a wonderful project. That's great. Yeah, go to town, get a tiny little microprocessor, build every synthesizer in the world in it and give you one knob to play with it. Fantastic. Go and do that if that's what you're interested in. But it does not interest me in any way. In any way, shape or form. Guitar Rig 7. Now, I'm a long time user of Guitar Rig. I used to, in fact I still have, over there, the original Native Instruments Guitar Rig pedal thing that you'd plug in that works via essentially an audio signal that you send into your audio interface, I think, which then you could use to control express. Anyway, by the by, Guitar Rig is now on version 7. And it's an extraordinary thing. It's too extraordinary. Yeah, I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about it with Amplitude as well from RK Multimedia, who of course is the alternative. You have Amplitude or you have Guitar Rig. And both of them have gone in a similar direction in that I can't find a normal sound. I turn on Amplitude and I'm wading through pages and pages. Look, can I just have a little bit of crunch? I just want a little bit of a crunchy guitar that I'm just practicing doing something with. Guitar Rig is the same. You've got endless presets, endless styles and possibilities and craziness, and it's like, I just want to find like guitar normal guitar sound, please. And it's impossible to find. You've got to wade through endless things, or you've got to kind of build it from scratch, which means you've got to understand what the heck is going on in this thing. Whereas can I just have a preset that says rock guitar, and for it not to be crazy rock guitar, just calm rock guitar? I mean, maybe these things exist and I'm just too busy to find these things out. Too stupid, I imagine. Anyway, we have a new version of Guitar Rig. Woohoo! I mean, I've always liked the look and the vibe. Ultimately, if I'm looking for weird effects and stuff, I find that to be quite fun in there. And I like the fact that it doesn't have to look like a guitar amp. You know, I mean, Amplitude goes very much for it must look like the guitar and it must look like the pedal, whereas Guitar Rig goes, well, it looks a bit like it, but we're just going to do it all in some kind of uniformal modular fashion, and I don't mind that. I mean, it looks prettier than it did in previous times, and they have gone in for a little bit more of skinning it in such a way to give it a more of an amp look and flavour, and that's fine also. I'm not saying it's not fine, it's fine. Anyway, what does Guitar Rig 7 have? Oh, it has a few more amps. Do we care? No, I've already got 1,000 amps. But hey, I've got 1,004 amps. Apparently there's a couple more effects. Really couple more effects. Woo! That's awesome. However, there is one feature which looks like it could be a fascinating thing, and that's a looper. Amplitude also has a looper, which I play with that a little bit. That's not too bad. So I'm interested in playing with the Guitar Rig 7, particularly in terms of using a Surface and a touchscreen with that. How well is that going to work? Is that going to be a useful way? Because ultimately with loopers, the biggest problem you have is when you're playing guitar, how do you access that without a foot pedal? Maybe I need to bring my Guitar Rig thing stomp pedal back in. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. I'm just making this up as I go. Oh, the other new thing is I have intelligent circuit modelling, which means I guess the whole thing sounds better than it did before. I thought it sounded all right in the first place. But hey, now it's going to sound even more realistic. The more I talk about it, the more I think I really want to go and have a play. Analogue Solutions are off their rocker. They are out there somewhere They are flying by the seat of their pants. They're in a completely different world, I think, to most of us, but it seems to be bloody working. I mean, for a little while there, they seemed to be going down the avenue of making little boxes of things, you know, because they had their sort of larger desktop synths, which are cool, the fuse box, bits and pieces. Then they were pulling things out of that, putting them in little boxes, and it's almost like you could imagine what happened. It's almost as if they probably sat down and had a meeting and said, right, we've got these great little boxes. They're awesome. Right, I mean, they only cost like 99 quid. So how many of these do we have to sell to actually be able to afford coffee next week? And they go, I've got to sell about 10,000. Oh, right. That's quite a lot. We're going to be here forever screwing these things together and then like making $5 on each one. That's a disaster. We just can't keep that up. I want to buy a yacht and go on holiday. You know, you imagine that's the sort of conversation that they were having. So they thought, well, why don't we, rather than building these little bloody boxes, which are cute, you know, and all that, but let's just build the biggest synthesizer in the world and just assume people will buy it. Yeah, sounds great. Let's do that. So that's what they did. And so we had this enormous colossus synthesizer that they took to SynthFest and set it up, looking like some kind of laboratory, looking like some kind of old EMS synthy thing. And you looked at it, we sort of came up and we worshipped for a little while and had a poke around and thought, wow, who's ever going to buy one of those? But then a steady stream on their like Instagram and Facebook were them being delivered to people. So there's something in building an enormous analog synthesizer that there's enough people out there who go, yeah, I'll have one of those. Thanks very much. Here's 30 grand. And so rather than having to sell 10,000 of these little boxes, they only got to sell half a dozen of the big ones, and they're all swanning about on yachts and having a lovely time. That's got to be the way forward, hasn't it? Hasn't it? I don't know. But anyway, they're keeping going at it, and they have a couple of new things. One of them, as I say, is quite restrained, which I thought was good, and it's called Ample, which is brilliant. Oh, it's just an absolute work of genius. Ample. The other one is Maximus, which again, it's not quite so stunning as a name. It's a bit more, yeah, all right, that fits. But the Ample one, I thought that was a beautiful, beautiful thing. So what do we have? Ample is a desktop analog synthesizer, about £2,000, 3 oscillators, off you go. So you've got to think of it in terms of something like the Synth-Trix, something like that. Good, meaty, analog, pristine and premium desktop synthesizer that's got oscillators that you're going to fall in love with. Fantastic filters. But they've also brought in some interesting bits and pieces. They've stuck in the generator sequencer, which is awesome. I did a video on that many, many years ago. Fantastic analog, hands-on, tricksy little sequencer that can do all sorts of things. It's also brought the control touch plate pads as well that you can throw in to either trigger things or to change notes or to change modes. Bits and pieces going on with that. It's also got the pin matrix in there, so they've brought stuff in from lots of different things that they do. It's almost like a little best of, you know, 3 oscillator, gorgeous desktop synthesizer. Great job, Ample, brilliant. If I had $2,000 to place on a synthesizer, you know, that would be on my list. So good job with that. The Maximus, on the other hand, is, I mean, it's an Oberheim 8 voice. I mean, let's call it what it is. It's 8 voice polyphonic analog synthesizer where each voice has its own entire synthesizer. So it's like where you'd have 8 stems together to make the Oberheim 8 voice. This is 8 rows of monophonic synthesizers that are somehow patched together in order to create a polyphonic experience. How well that works, who knows at the moment. No one's even heard it, but they're already sold out because we're crazy. Because somehow out there are enough synthesizer enthusiasts with deep pockets who just love what it is that Analog Solutions offer, which is a supreme and premium synthesizer experience, you know, made by these crazy people that look amazing, sound amazing, and are going to be an enormous amount of fun to play with, I should think. I mean, with the 8 voice though, because the interesting thing with the 8 voice is that we've all now, I think, had a go on one in software, because both Cherry Audio and GeForce Instruments released an emulation of the Oberheim 8 voice, which is brilliant. And it's fascinating having to tune those individual synthesizers in order to get everything to work together. But of course what they did in software was they tied it all up very neatly. They allowed you to address all of it from a single control panel, so you could tie it together and use it as a polyphonic synthesizer like later synthesizers became, rather than having to tune absolutely every single thing individually. So you wonder how much of that is in the Maximus. If is any of it in the Maximus? Is there going to be any combined control running from one surface, or is it all going to be individual? Don't know. But hey, I don't have the height. I don't have the height in my shed for one of those. So Tom at Analogue Solutions, don't send me one. That would be crazy. I'd have nowhere to put it, and it will probably break my workbench anyway. So yeah, just don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'll be all right. I mean, I'd love the fact that these synthesizers are available. They're amazing, and I'm baffled and emboldened and encouraged by the fact that there are people out there who can make that sort of thing happen, who can purchase these incredible products that allow them to come into being. You know, that's fantastic. Well, I mean, I'm sure we all want cheap synths, yeah, but there's some people who really, really don't, and that's amazing. Talking about lunatics, Pet Rock is a weird module, and Jeremy Red Memes Recording did an awesomely weird and strange video on it as well. What is it? Well, it's a generator of patterns that are controlled ultimately by the phases of the moon, by lunar activity. And so the amount of change and the amount of variation you get in those patterns depends on the day of the week that you're using it. So you'll get something out of it for a while, and then it will gradually change as the shifting of the heavenly bodies and the cosmos revolves around us. Fascinating. So you could leave it running for a month, and after a month it will change into something else. It's like it's using the moon in order to alter its mood. Give it a couple of triggers and it goes, well, I don't know, which one of these do I fancy? And it will kick one of them out or another one out, and it will keep doing that in various ways until, as I say, the change comes over it. As the phase changes, as it goes from new to full, and then it happens to be some kind of metabolic transformation that happens within the thought process of the module itself. Or you could see it as a module that whenever you come back to it, it will sound slightly different. It will do something slightly different. Interesting. Very interesting that we're hit with a trio of Eurorack mixers, all within the space of a couple of days. In fact, I think it all happened at Knobcon. Knobcon was an interesting convention this year because there was bugger all information that came out of it. There's no videos. No anything. I mean, I know DivKid was there and he's planning to put together a bunch of videos and things that he saw, and those will come out in time. But the coverage of it was kind of weird, considering how much overload we get from NAMM or Super Booth or SynthFest and other bits and pieces. Knobcon, it's like they label themselves as being the biggest synth show in the world, and yet no one ever says anything about it. Weird. Anyway, there were three new mixers in evidence. One from Noise Engineering, one from Boredbrain, and one from 1010 Music. And it's really interesting in how they are different and unique, and yet are all trying to solve the same sort of problem of doing multi-channel mixing within Eurorack. You've got the hybrid from Noise Engineering, which is a digitally controlled analog mixer. You've got fully digital from 1010 Music with their bluebox digital touchscreen mixer. And then you've got fully analog with Boredbrain. The Boredbrain one is called XCELON, I think is what they're going for with that spelling, I think. And this is 6 channels of stereo mixing, by which I don't just mean mixing mono to stereo, which what stereo mixing seems to mean these days. This is actual stereo channels going in, so you can mix the output from stereo modules or effects processors directly into the mixer, which is very interesting. And then each of those channels is fully voltage controllable, so the panel, the balance I suppose, and the level can all be controlled via CV. It also has 2 effects ends, which I think is really, really worthwhile on a mixer. 1 is great, 2 is absolutely, I think, what you need. Because you've got 1 for your reverb, of course, reverb. But 2 means that you can add in a delay and then route different channels to it. And I really really happen to enjoy that. Oddly, there's no master fader, there's no headphone output, so there's a few things that seem to be missing off this particular one, but I think the plan is that you pipe the output into their own Boredbrain output module, and then you use that for overall level control and bits and pieces. But yeah, very interesting, very solid. The noise engineering one has almost like a comically Latin name this time. It's kind of Mixa. You know, actually giving it the name of the thing that it does is very unusual for noise engineering, and I, for one, really appreciate it. But this again is stereo mixing properly, but with 10 channels this time. Kind of, you know, the inputs are like this as opposed to side by side, and you've got a single fader which appears to light up, very, very compact and squashed together as much as possible to give you as much mixing within a smaller space as possible. Now this is slightly different in that it has a digital control system inside. You've got a little screen which is going to show you all the routing and also different things, so there's a button on each channel which you can press and then select things like the panning, like effect sends, like routing and other bits of control, and you can save all of that within the preset, which is very interesting. Preset saving on mixers in Eurorack, that's not something you come across very often. So this combination of analog mixer, analog front panel and digital saving of bits and pieces, I think is cool, is interesting. And lastly, the Bluebox one from 1010 Music is bringing their very successful desktop digital mixer and sticking it into Eurorack, which is very, very interesting. I mean, it gives you this touchscreen interface, which is not always an awesome thing, but hey, it's large, it's bright, you're going to be able to see it and access everything that you need to do within that arena. It has 12 channels of straightforward Eurorack straight into it. It also comes with CV control, which you don't get in the external one. The touchscreen gives you control over level and pan, but it also gives you control over a 4-band EQ, mute and solo, and also, perhaps and most importantly, it records, which is great. It's one of those things that surprises me in Eurorack, actually, that there's not more recording options built into things. There should just be a module. I mean, there probably is a wave recording module, I suppose, but it's the sort of thing that you would have thought would pop up a little bit more often. Just the ability to have your output running through something where you can just hit a button and start recording directly to an SD card or something like that. But that's what the Bluebox Eurorack is able to do. So you can run 12 channels, 12 channels of stuff through it and capture the whole lot, either as multi-track or as a stereo mix. And it also has some effects built in, some reverb, some delay, some compression, so you're not even having to route out of those effect sends into something else. You've got that all within the unit itself. So good. Yeah, so 3 different mixers, all are trying to achieve the same thing in different ways. So we are spoilt for choice. The Bastl Instruments Castle, not sure, Castle, what? The Castle from Bastl Instruments is a fabulous little box. I mean, the one I was talking about little boxes earlier, this is exactly the opposite. Isn't that interesting? Because it is the user interface. I mean, you can do things that are small, that's okay. That's okay. Just give us the stuff. Give us the stuff. Don't give us a little tiny display with a knob. I mean, what? Oh, I don't want to go back down that road again. So what Bastl do with the Castle? What Bastl do with Bastl? So what Bastl do with the Castle? It must be Castle with Bastl. Otherwise, I'll be saying Bastl. Bastl Instruments Castle. That doesn't seem right somehow. So the Bastl Castle. Dear. So the Bastl Castle is a great little box that's full of sound and noise and glitch and rhythm. They've got a drum one, they've got an 8-bitty one, you've got a glitchy kind of one, you've got patch wires. I mean, it's fiddly and stupid, but you can get in there and feel your way around and make noise in an interactive, small user interface, but totally usable user interface fashion. The latest one is called the ARP. And the idea of this is, right, that it actually makes tunes. Because the rest kind of go... that kind of thing. Whereas this is going to go to some degree. It has sine waves, but it also has a whole load of wave folding kind of destruction stuff going on. So you can start with something relatively pure. You can have it making lovely trills and bits and pieces, and then you can start to destroy it, which is perfect. That's what you want in a little box. I mean, I would happily be trapped on a train with a little box like that to play with, much more so than some kind of Woovebox, personally. So inevitably it's a whole load of fun, a whole load of noise and glitch in a small form box, which is just great, and it's going to run brilliantly with the other ones. You could probably patch them all together with Patchwise. Fantastic. Oh my goodness, I'm not even halfway through yet. Okay, right, another patch bay from DF Audio. Now, I've had a couple of their patch bays. I've got one over there somewhere. I can't quite see it. This I just thought was brilliant in as much as that he did a little video of it just working, and it was perfect. Because we get confused, I get confused with patch bays. What am I patching in here, and what am I going to, and what's the purpose of this? Why have I put this in the way of all the stuff I'm trying to connect together? Is this helping? Is it not helping? Anyway, he did this little video on this mini patch bay that they're doing. It's like 4 in and out or something, and it's perfect for Eurorack or perfect for guitar pedals. And it just shows you brilliantly how that functions. Plug in your guitar pedals, whole bunch of guitar pedals here, got my little patch bay, and I just plug in why it is that I want to go through them. They're brilliant, totally brilliant. Or you can do it totally within Eurorack, so your little patch bay just goes through different effects on your system. It's great, it's perfect, it's simple, passive, I imagine, and good quality, cheap. I don't think there's anything else quite like it. It's just a simple utility, but does absolutely the job of what it's trying to do. That usually you'd have to buy big rack things for patch bays and other complicated things, and this is just simple, straightforward, not too many channels, job done. Now, the Manifold Research Centre seemed like a weird bunch of people. I have no idea what the people are like, but the products are a little bit on the slightly crazy side, I would say. The Delta hat, is it Delta hat or Delta upside down V? I'm not sure what it is. Anyway, this Delta thing, it looks spectacular. It has a little bit of an old folksy look on the front panel, but then you've got these clattering mechanical keys which essentially help you generate modulation, generate LFOs. Is that the idea? I think so. What I like about it, what really sort of stuck in my head, is this idea you can just tap your way to cycles. So you've got these 9 buttons and you've got, I think, 9 outputs. Let me check. Yeah, there are 9 keys. And essentially each one can generate its own clock, generate its own time just through using a tap tempo. So you go tap, tap, and tap, tap on this one, and tap, tap. But the output that you're generating, you can shape into different things. So it can just be pulses. So you've got a whole way of just generating clocks, which are completely unrelated to each other, potentially. But you can shape them into LFOs, or I guess envelopes, or something that's looping. So it's a really quick and easy way to generate an LFO. Rather than trying to turn a rate down on an LFO to find it, trying to find the speed of it, you can just tap it in and boom, it's doing its thing. And I really like that. I thought that was quite ingenious. So you can very quickly just stick modulation through things without having to think about it too hard. You can just bash that out and have them related or not, or tied to each other or not. And I thought that was really clever. I liked that. I like that. The AMSynths Diode-01 is a recreation of the Roland System 100 keyboard synth section. To some degree. The System 100 gets a bit confusing. I mean, it is, for me, probably one of the most gorgeous looking synthesizers that was ever made. I love the styling. There's something about it which is Space 1999. It fills you full of this sort of retro sci-fi concepts of how we thought we would be living by this time, and of course evidently we are not. But I like that future nostalgic kind of vibe that the System 100 gives off. It has these panels and these separate things that connect together in this gorgeous way, and it looks fantastic, and the font's amazing, and the colour is extraordinary. All of these things I love about the System 100. So AMSynths have decided to do a bit of recreation. They do a lot of recreations. They love to emulate stuff, clone interesting bits and pieces out of old historical synthesizers, and so this is absolutely up their alley, I would say. At least in terms of sonic recreation, of synthesizer recreation. What they're not quite so good at is capturing the design flair of what it is that kind of elevated the System 100 beyond perhaps just its sonic potential. But never mind, I'm still very much interested in this. And so this takes the synthesizer part of the System 100. Now, System 100 had these different modules within it. They were called 101 and 102, funnily enough, which then, of course, as you can imagine, became the SH101 down the line and other bits and pieces. So what you have in the System 100 is these two synthesizer sections, the 101 and the 102. The 102 being the section that didn't have the keyboard attached, the 101 being the section that did, SH101 down the line. But what AMSynths have done has taken elements from both and kind of squashed them together. So you've got the ring mod taken out of the 102 and put into this Diode-01, and there's other little quirks and bits and pieces like that as well, which just kind of flesh it out into a single unit. But it looks very much like the size and shape of a Mother 32, that kind of thing. But it has all the sliders, all the knobs, all the bits and pieces that you would expect. It just doesn't quite have the look. I would love to see it built out into something a little bit more spacey. That's all I'm saying. A bit more sci-fi like, a bit more crazy. But at the moment, AMSynths are toying with the idea of doing it as a kit. I think that would be brilliant. I would love to take that on as a kit because it would be a good size, interesting synthesizer to build. So they're still thinking about it, but they should have it at SynthFest or Bristronica. I think one or the other. They'll be showing it, and they should be taking orders on it soon. DAWproject. Oh yes, this is a new thing. This is a brand new format in which you can transfer projects from one DAW to another. Fantastic. We can kind of already do this to some degree, to a small degree. You can use MIDI files and transfer MIDI data, entire arrangements across from one thing to another. Or you can use something like OMF or AAF or something, AAX, I can't remember, some other format, AAF could be, to transfer audio clips and audio arrangements from one place to another. So there's already sort of things in place that do that, but none of it does it very successfully or very satisfactorily. And ultimately, all of the important stuff, which is things like your automation, your mix, your expression data, your plugins, all of that is missed out. DAWproject aims to sort all of that out and to become the de facto default way of sharing projects between DAWs. Brilliant. So Bitwig have been working on it. Presonus have been working on it. In fact, as I'm filming this now, they haven't quite announced it. They should be announcing it in a few hours, I think. So it will probably all be out by the time this is edited and rendered and up there. So what it is, from what I can gather before we actually have all the information, is that what it does is it's an open format, open source format, which you can use in your project. You can export your project as a DAW project, and within that you will get all the MIDI information, all the audio information, all the automation information. You will get things like clip gains and fades and crossfades. You'll get markers, you'll get note expression, so NPE information, and then you will get all of the plugin information. So if you have the same third-party plugins in both DAWs, then it will recreate all of that when you move it across. Now the very clever thing is that if you're using stock plugins, so the ones that are built into the DAW and are not actually shareable with other DAWs because they're not standalone plugins, so your EQ, your reverbs, your compression, your limited, that kind of stuff, all of that, they're going to attempt to translate that between different DAWs. So you use your stock plugins, you export it, plug it into the other DAW, and it will try to interpret all of that information into their own EQ, their own reverb compressors, and so on and so forth, which means you can do an entire mix, a properly automated, parametered, plug-in laden mix, and shift the whole thing to another DAW. Fabulous. Fantastic. What a thing. What a thing. Why would you want to do this? Well, I don't know. I mean, most of us like having different DAWs and just like farting stuff between one. No, I mean, I guess really the key thing is going to be collaboration. So if you go to a studio where somebody else is working and they only use Pro Tools, for instance, you can take your DAWproject file and open it up there, and you'll have absolutely everything that you did in Bitwig or Studio One or Cubase or Logic or whatever, and it will open it up more or less perfectly on that thing. Or you're working on a project, you need someone to put their vocals in it, you can send them the DAWproject file and they can open it in Reaper or in FL Studio and add their stuff, send it back, and you can reopen it. That's the dream, I think. That's the idea. That's where we're trying to get to. Is it there yet? No. Currently it's only Bitwig and Studio One. So it's these two firms that have been playing with this idea. Bitwig Studio's been a little bit more open with it because their current beta has it within itself already. So you can already start to play with it. Although you've got nowhere to send it unless you're on also the Presonus kind of beta program, which I'm not. So I haven't been able to see how it actually works between these two bits of software. But I'm told it's really good. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that works out, because it is quite exciting. And the other thing that occurs to me about it is that it makes migrating from one DAW to another far easier. Or you might find there's something that you really like doing in Reason, and so you can use that, do that bit, and then move it back to Studio One and finish off your mix there, taking everything with it. You know, that's quite nice. Rather than having to render it all out into audio files and then re-import those audio files, you can actually take the project. That's interesting. There are things which will kind of fall through the cracks. So Presonus was saying things like, well, you know, we've got a video track, Bitwig doesn't. So while we can send out all the information about the video track, Bitwig will just go and ignore it. Similarly, Bitwig has clip launching, Studio One doesn't. So Bitwig will bundle up all of the information about the clip launching page and send that out in the DAWproject, but Studio One will just simply ignore it. So, you know, there's always going to be differences between these things. And it's not trying to replace your native project saving facility, because there's all sorts of uniqueness and weirdness and views and history and other bits and pieces which are present within the DAW that you use, which are not going to be translated. But as an option to move between DAWs, fantastic. I mean, it could mean that you might be able to resurrect some old projects that you were running in some old DAW that you want to be able to run in the new DAW that you use. Maybe that becomes a possibility. In either way, it's pretty interesting. And while I'm just mentioning Studio One, this is all in the new 6.5 version, which also includes a whole bunch of Atmos stuff right within the DAW. So you can do a complete Atmos mix within the regular version of Studio One, which is amazing. And that's something I'm going to look into, because Atmos is a weird area where we're kind of being pushed by Apple into it, because Apple Music requires you to do an Atmos mix. But no one has the facilities to do it. I can't put a dozen speakers in here. That's never going to happen. But the interesting thing is with Atmos and in Studio One is that it can do the whole thing on a pair of headphones. Interesting. Dreadbox have reissued the Hypnosis as a Eurorack module. Now, there's something really important that you need to be aware of when I talk about this, because the Hypnosis, that's the Eurorack module, the new reissued one, is not the same as the desktop one. It took me a little bit of time to work this out, you know, after I'd actually purchased the reissue, and when I got it and I was working with it, and it was only then that I realized actually these are very different things. I mean, the idea is the same. It's an 80s inspired lo-fi time processor effects module, and both of them contain chorus, flanger, delay and reverb, spring reverb. So in that regard, they are the same, but the facilities within each one are very different. The original desktop module has 3 LFOs mucking about on the chorus, it's got 3 different modes of delay, and there were some other shenanigans going on with the reverb. Whereas in the new one, the reissue, the chorus only has 1 LFO, there's only 1 delay, and it's a delay based on the Ariba, so it's nothing to do with any of the delays that are in the previous one. And the spring reverb is just a spring reverb. It's nice and it does its thing. Now it's great, it's really good, it's far cheaper than the desktop module, and it comes as a kit. It's very easy, just screw it together, put it into your rack, and it gives you these great solid, lo-fi and relatively crunchy effects. It's great. I've done an entire video on it which I explain the whole business, and I also struggle a lot with the chorus and reverb because that's not quite as exactly as stunning as you hope it might be. But the delay is awesome, the spring reverb is great, and so there's a lot going for it. It's just got to tease that chorus flanging sign out a little bit. But go and check out the video, all the details in there, and it's well worth a moment of your time. They're still at it behind me. I am sorry about all the extra noise this month, but hey, we're cracking on. So next up we've got the Plum Audio ADVA. This is a massively multi-mode filter, really acidy, squelchy filter in a really nice small package. It's got a couple of concentric knobs to which you can access modes and then access cut-off and resonance and bits and pieces. Very cleverly designed to keep the size small, because I am definitely finding that filters are a bit too wide. I could do with some smaller filters, and this looks like it can pack an awful lot into the one thing. It's also available in 3U and 1U, which is really nice. So as I say, it's got a whole load of different filtering modes. It's also got a digital control system for different routings and changes within the module itself. It has a noise generator built in, so you can add those swooshing sounds to your filtering, and a VCA. So it's actually taking up a lot of extraneous filters, building it into itself to making it a very, very useful compact filter within your Eurorack. Did I mention that it has distortion on the input and the output? I mean, this is, I think, why it's kind of been billed as a very acid type filter, because you can really overdrive it. You can get in some seriously gnarly tones from it, which is fantastic. So, you know, can't find a thing wrong with it. Milo Melodies did a fantastic video on it. It's just an awesome thing to have. A couple of fascinating new modules from Larix Electro. I think they're called something like the Ritournelle. It seems a little bit French. I think I was going for there. Who knows? These are CV and trigger generators. They're both sort of similar, working on a similar idea. One, of course, creating sequences, the other one creating rhythms and generators. They have an element of Turing machine about them, I think, but you have a series of knobs which affect the way the sequence is built. And these are also CV controllable, so you can start getting some modulation in there, which is going to vary the sequence. You've kind of got like root note, you've got depth and breadth, or note range or randomization or something, but in any respect you've got these 4 ways to interact with the sequence in order to change the way that it's generating these notes. You can then loop it once you've found something that you quite like, or you can continue to modulate it to get it to continue to generate more and to find more and more sequences. There's also a bit of an expander for it, which adds attenuation to the CV that's coming in, which is something you could probably use a Molten motion meter for. And there's also a trigger output as well, so you can add an additional 8 triggers to it, so it's generating patterns as it's going. But there's also a separate pattern-based one, which has a similar idea, but this is producing a row of 8 steps. It uses Euclidean along with some other randomization and generation algorithms. So these two things together could essentially run your whole show. You've got sequences going on, you've got triggers going on, so you've got your drums, or you've got your envelope firing along with the sequence, which can also generate other triggers. So there's kind of an interesting interplay between these two modules, which also have these expanders that can make it infect your modular in a much bigger way. So randomization, generation, trigger generation, pattern generation, all very controllable and interactable with these couple of modules. Nearly there, I think. One of the most fascinating things that come out of KnobCon was the 4MS Meta. Apparently 4MS weren't really meant to show it. I think it was just knocking around and someone had a look. Somebody took a photo of it, and now we're all talking about it. And what it is, right, it appears to be a module which has a screen display on it, which is running a version of VCV Rack. So VCV Rack is a virtual modular environment that you run on your computer, where you can build huge networks of modular synthesizers, and that appeared to be running on a module within a hardware modular synthesizer. So that's where the meta idea comes from. So we're assuming, because there's not a whole lot of information about it at the moment, but we're assuming that you take some VCV Rack patch, dump it somehow into the module, and then you've got this entire modular universe operating within a module within your modular universe. It's not entirely that. I mean, so on initial inspection, that's what it looks like, but it's actually, I think, a little bit more cut down than that. It seems to be, because looking at the screen and what you were seeing, it's not actually the same as VCV Rack. It's the modules from it, but it's not the interface. So it's not an entire copy. I think the idea is that it's pulling specific modules from VCV Rack and allowing you to run them within this DSP-based framework, which of course it inevitably is. It's a development platform, and within this platform they are currently running 4MS and Bufacco virtual modules. So within its context you can create a patch using the right sort of modules, and those you can then export and put into here. So it's not just going to take any old thing, it has to be quite specific. But regardless, I mean, it's a fantastic way of trying out different modules within your system, because you could take from all of these places, build up the sort of dream modular within that patch, within the modules that are available, and run it and see what that feels like. Is that good? I don't know. To me, personally, it feels like too much fiddling around. I have hard enough trouble fiddling around as it is, without giving myself an extra level of fiddling around within a module that I'm fiddling around with. So yeah, maybe it's certainly interesting as a concept. Yeah, totally brilliant, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be something for me. SOMA Labs snuck something out there, a bit more of a concept, sort of something that's not even quite prototype yet, but is something that they are playing with and having undoubtedly an enormous amount of fun. And this is Flux. It's kind of a theremin, but it is, to my mind, absolutely where the theremin needs to go. I think it's quite a bit of genius, because the theremin is great, right? You've got these two aerials and you're wanging around and that kind of thing, and that's great. Everybody loves those. In fact, weirdly, the theremin is still one of Moog's biggest selling products ever. People just like waving at it. Anyway, what Flux does is takes that idea of waving your hands around, but kind of controls it to make it more musical and more interesting, perhaps. It's actually using magnets. It's using a magnetic field, or little magnets in your hands against a magnetic field. You've got this desktop or this bench type thing, a fretboard maybe. Let's call it a fretboard. You've got like this fretboard, you've got some magnets in your hands, and you're using those to adjust pitch, to adjust level, to adjust modulation, while giving you control on one hand and performance on the other, but very much entering into the spirit of the theremin and the way that you have to physically interact with it. And that's what's interesting, I think. So it's bringing in a lot more control, a lot more change, a lot more possibility within all sorts of different access, and you've got also twist of the magnet as well as position of it, which gives you an enormous amount of expressive control. And it's just done brilliantly in the way that SOMA Labs realize and think about these things. It's a beautiful approach to what is looking like a beautiful instrument. We had a bit of trouble in news come out of Modal Electronics. And Modal Electronics are the company behind the Argon 8, the Cobalt 8, and other synthesizers of that nature. And they've been going for quite a while, building synthesizers out of Bristol. Now, I spoke to the CEO in an interview, I think about a year ago, and he mentioned how they're essentially moving out of Bristol, or there's no factory there anymore. Everything is done elsewhere, and people kind of work remotely. But since then, they seem to have sort of spiraled into something else. They've had a lot of trouble, and it emerged that in their account filings, they haven't been able to file any accounts for a little bit of time, and essentially Companies House have put them into administration. And that was quite a shock. It means that is that the end for Modal? But as it turns out, at Gear News, we were able to get in contact with the current managing director, and they essentially said, no, it's all right, we're just restructuring. What does that mean? I don't know, it's really difficult to know. Essentially, what we can see on the surface is that they've never made any money, or they've run out of money, or they're in huge amounts of debt, and essentially need to close down Modal Electronics Limited in order to get past that stage. Now, it may be that they get shut down and then that's the end of it. It may be that they shut down, get rid of the debt, and re-emerge as something else or somebody else, or they get bought out completely with all the debt and everything is sorted out. We don't really know. The reaction has been quite interesting, quite mixed. I mean, obviously it's a terrible, terrible thing if people are put out of work, and for a synthesizer builder to end up disappearing under the weight of debt. That's a real shame, because they make good products, quality products, and they've done, as far as we see from the outside, they've been very, very successful. So it's very sad to see the passing of that, if that's what's happened. But on the other hand, there's also been a lot of ex-employees who have been quite vocal in their disapproval of how Modal do things, and of particular members of the management and how they handle stuff. So there's a few people going, well, good riddance to bad people, which has been a little bit strange. But hey, I mean, absolutely, I would support anybody who feels they've been mistreated by a company. That's a terrible thing to hear. Well, it'll be interesting to see what pans out, whether this restructuring is just the end or whether something will pick up and allow them to continue. What Christian at Modal did say was that all the staff are being taken care of and are still employed, and so that's a very encouraging thing to hear, but how long that will go on for, we do not know. And finally, just to bring this whole thing to a close, I need to talk briefly about Bristronica and SynthFest. So the Machina Bristronica is happening in Bristol this weekend. I'm going for the whole weekend. I've booked my hotel. I am going by public transport, which is exciting. I'm going to catch a bus at the end of my road on Friday morning, and sometime Friday evening I will emerge in Bristol. It's going to be terribly, terribly exciting. Terribly exciting. Looks like a great weekend. There's a pre-party, there's an after-party, there's stuff going on, there's seminars, there's manufacturers, there's performances all the way through the day. It's going to be a bit crazy. I mean, particularly crazy because the after party goes on to about 4 in the morning. I mean, I'm not going to be able to cope with that. I mean, I think Mylar Melodies is on at midnight. If I can get to Mylar, see him perform, then that's probably going to be enough for me. Because then I've got to spend all day Sunday making my way back here. So that's exciting. That's this weekend. So I'm really looking forward to that. I've never been before, so this is going to be great. And all the usuals are going to be there. So I'm looking forward to having a few beers. Because I won't be driving, I'll be staying the night, I might actually be able to do that. So it's very exciting. If I can survive, because I am a lightweight, I am mostly decrepit, and so I don't know how much of it I'm going to be able to cope with. The other thing I'm going to be doing, I'm going to try, I think I get the feeling I say this every year, I'm going to try to be brave and actually film something. In some ways I'm inspired by the sort of lack of coverage at Knobcom, that I think, well, heck, I mean, I'm a YouTuber, I should probably make a bit of a video or something. But I don't want to then be trapped in the making a video side of things and feel like I'm working it as opposed to having a good time and enjoying myself. So I'm trying to find a middle way. So what I've decided to do, I've got hold of a 360 camera and a invisible selfie stick. What is that? And I'm going to hold this thing up. I'm going to be brave and go, oh my God, I can't believe I look like such an idiot doing this. I'm going to hold this camera up and I'm going to try to take some video of the event. I'm just going to keep it in my bag and get it out whenever I can and go, don't mind me. I'm not an idiot. I'm sorry. I'm a YouTuber, you know, and try to capture some of what that's about. So I can then stick that up and people can go, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Thank you ever so much. You're really, really helpful. That's what I hope might happen. It might just stay in my bag the whole time. I don't know. But I'm into the concept, man. I'm definitely into the concept. So that's this weekend. Following weekend is SynthFest up in Sheffield, which I've been going to for a fair few years now. And that's the same sort of thing. Lots of manufacturers. Not so much in the way of performances. There are a few seminars which look interesting. But it's a much more low-key, serious, you know. Bristronica is like a massive party, whereas SynthFest is a little bit more, you know, relaxed and serious and proper, which is good. You know, both of those things are good. Both of those things should exist. So I'm looking forward to both. And for SynthFest, I'm taking a couple of kids with me, and we've decided to go to Alton Towers on the Sunday. So, hey, that'll be fun. So I'm not staying around or anything. I'll turn up for the day, and then in the evening we're heading off towards Derby and Alton way, and so I won't be around in the evening or anything like that. But if you are around at SynthFest during the day, it is actually the 10-year anniversary of Molten Music Technology on that day, and so I've decided that I will be in the bar at 4 o'clock if you'd just like to say hello, you know, just briefly. If you haven't met me or seen me during the day and you wanted to, then come and meet me at 4 o'clock. And I'll be happy to shake your hand and chat about stuff and have a coffee. That'll be lovely. Let's do that. That might be nice. I don't know. It might not be, in which case I'll just clear off. That's fine. So while I'm talking about shows, I should mention Synth East, in case you haven't heard of that. Synth East 2024 is absolutely happening in Norwich. 23rd, 24th and possibly the 25th of February. That's the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Had a meeting about that yesterday. It was fantastic. The plan is awesome. I mean, if it all comes off, it's just going to be a fantastic weekend. I'm really very, very excited about it. Very excited about it. The rough idea, without giving anything away, is that Friday night is going to be interesting, either a talk or a film or a couple of those sorts of things, where you can just come and have a beer and we can chat about interesting things. The Saturday is the expo. We got all the manufacturers and the performances throughout. The patch off, we're going to do that again. Some performances from other people during the day. Come and try some stuff out, talk to the manufacturers and just have a lovely time. Then in the evening, we've got some potentially fantastic artists coming to play, which is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And then potentially on the Sunday we might have some workshops. Still working that out, but at the moment we might have a little bit of DIY going on, which will be brilliant. So I'm looking forward to sorting all that out. So we're not going to be doing anything about Synth until after SynthFest. So hopefully by the end of October we hope to have everything in place, everything booked, to be able to start opening it up to ticket sales and all that business. So that's the plan for that. And it's just coming together really excitingly, and I'm pumped about it. Oh yes. So that'll do. That's plenty. I think my SD card is about to be full up from all of that jibby jabbering on about stuff. Coming up, I don't know. I'll see you at the show. No live stream this time because I'll be at Bristronica and then I'll be at SynthFest. So no time for any of that. Do look out for my 10-year anniversary video that I'm going to throw together somewhere between Bristronica and SynthFest. I think with a bit of luck. That might be interesting. Well, who knows. And as for stuff that I'm doing or planning to do at the moment, my next project is the Night Rider from RYK. Fantastic, interesting, weird, strange filtering module. And then I'll be doing a review of the Endless processor, then Pianophonic. I might see if I can do something on the Stolper beats, maybe on the Trinity, the Gliss. There's no end, absolutely no end to the stuff I could be doing, but that's the plan at the moment. A whole bunch of that. Also the IK Yodo Synth Pro, that too. Lots more to do. I hope that's helpful. The other thing I'll quickly mention, just as it is the 10-year anniversary, is that I'm nearly at 50,000 subs on YouTube. It'd be really great to get to 50,000. I think I'm just about to hit 48,000. So do you know 2,000 people that you could bring on board just in the next week or two, just so that I can say I'm at 50. So if you know 2,000 people, do bring them along. Poke and share and like and all those sorts of things you're supposed to do with videos, and see if you can get a few more subscribers. That'd be lovely. The other thing, it'd be great to hit 100 Patreons. I've been knocking around in the 90s now for a long time, which is great. I love our patrons. They're fantastic. They support me and throw me a couple of quid. You too could throw me a couple of quid. That would be great. Why don't you go and check out my Patreon? You can see all the stuff I don't really offer, but you can contribute to the video making and the ongoing development of what the heck it is that multimedia technology is all about and what it is that I think that I'm doing. Come and be part of it. That would be great. And in the meantime, go make some tunes.